The Final Furlong podcast is proudly brought to you by Jeff Banks Bet. Get up to £500 refunded as real money for new Jeff Banks online accounts after your first month of betting. Use promo code FFP500 at jeffbanks.bet. And by BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Our listeners get 10% off your first month. So give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/FURLONG.
One of the big stories over the weekend was the horrific equine fatalities at Cheltenham. Nobody ever wants to see that happen, Josh, and there's no words that ease the pain or make it in any way better for the connections, except to say massive sympathies go out to the trainers involved, to the jockeys involved. I know that's a brutal thing for them. You're obviously deeply upset for the grooms, the stable staff, connections of the horses, but I'm also massively, massively upset for Alice Plunkett and Rishi Prasad, who are two superb broadcasters and were put into an impossible position in a live television broadcast when it's a moment of euphoria, celebrating a win with the jockey, celebrating a win with the winning connections, and then thrust into something that is completely and totally beyond their control. The great broadcasters there, I think they handled it in the best possible way they could, but that was an impossible situation for them to be put in. Just overall, a horrible experience for everybody.
It was, and even to throw into there, and I'll come back to everyone you've talked about in a second, but even it was the first sponsorship of Holland and Cooper.
Oh.
You know, they're new people to our sport, and it was their first big sponsorship, and you know, and you go from the jubilance to just you know, the whole life sucked out of everything. But going back, I've heard that Sean Bowen was world class, so you wouldn't expect it to be any different, with the members of Warren Greatrix's team afterwards, and stayed afterwards with them to console them and talk to them. He's obviously gone out on social media as well, as has Warren, who spoke very eloquently afterwards. The comparisons between a Buffalo Soldier and Many Clouds in terms of the situation are frightening, in the fact that they were both trained out of the same yard, because Oliver was at Roanhurst at the time when that happened to him. They both had winners, and good winners, the same day. We had exactly the same when Oliver had a really nice winner of Trevor Hemmings on the same day. Warren had a winner yesterday as well before this. So they both had doubles on the day. And it's horrific statistically. Those equine deaths, looking at them, do not change the statistics of where we're at. It's a tiny percentage. For it to happen, for two horses to have heart attacks in the same race is awfully horrific. But the odds against it happening are massive. You know, it's you know, really tough. And then to lose one in the race afterwards is just, it combines it all together. It's and then obviously it was, if we talk about, I think Alice and Rish did as an amazing job. We know what it's like when you are producing live television or being part of that live production, that you are, you know, directors and producers. I feel for them. They're the ones we don't see. You know, do they want to, you know, if they could do it again, they would, because you know what's happening, but you don't know what's going to happen. And you're speaking to cameramen, you're speaking to producers, you're speaking to assistant producers. There's all sorts going on at one moment in time. And it was, a horrific scenes. It was not great for the sport, but then equally, our sport does come with a risk. If it wasn't at Cheltenham with the highlighted race of the day and all this kind of stuff, but it was, we've got to stand by our sport. And did I feel uncomfortable being part of the sport when I woke up this morning? And the answer is no. So, you know, people accept different levels of risk in any walk of life, and our sport comes with it.
Well said. There's a lot of things to feel uncomfortable about in racing, and the death of racehorses is obviously something that should shake you. It should upset you. But be aware of the fact that these horses exist for racing, and they are given, for the most part, great lives in racing. We want to breed them. We want to celebrate them. We want to race them, see them reach their full potential. And the people around them love them and are deeply affected. Ross is still broken by what happened to Roger. And that's the measure of who that person is. I know people in racing who are able to just go on from that pretty quickly. I know some people are able to go on from the death of a pet very quickly. I don't quite understand that. For me, it sticks with you and it lasts with you. And for most people, that's how it feels. And I think if you're a racing fan and you saw that and you felt the need to take a break, I would understand that. I really would. But we have to be understanding of the fact that there is a risk every single time a horse goes out and races, for the horse and for the jockey. And if you're not prepared to accept that risk, then this is not the sport for you. And that's okay. That is okay. Yeah. But that is very much a risk that is a part. I thought Racing TV were great. Lydia's piece with the vet was absolutely superb. Rishi and Alice, I'm genuinely sympathetic to both of them. I like both of them very, very much. Rishi is a phenomenal broadcaster. He's one of the best broadcasters in any sport, quite frankly. And his work at the British Cup was...
He covers every sport, you know.
Well, this is true. Yes, this is true. Yeah. But he should be. The man's absolutely brilliant. And Alice is just such a genuine, nice person. I'm deeply sympathetic to both of them for what they were put into. And well done to them and the ITV production team for doing the very best that they could in that scenario. However, that was ITV Racing. Then came ITV. So this is Tony Paley?
He's Guardian.
Apologies, Tony. I should have known that. From The Guardian. He tweeted out, Cheltenham events third item on ITV News. Footage of demise of Bangers and Cash and Napper Tandy shown, followed by Liam Kearns and then Rose Patterson of Animal Rising, who claim public support for horse racing is decreasing. We need to be thinking of a complete ban. So just for full context, let's play this and hope that ITV don't try and demonetize the channel for it. This is the third story on ITV News on Sunday night.
For those who oppose the sport.
Public support is decreasing for horse racing, and we are seeing things like welfare improvements come into place after our disruption of the Grand National last year, which obviously is better for horses in the short term. But yeah, we need to be thinking of phasing this out completely and having a complete ban.
Safety standards on racecourses in Britain and Ireland have never been higher, but 3 deaths in a single hour bring home the dangers of the toughest of sports. Chris Scudder, ITV News.
What exactly did the BHA spokesperson say to ITV on that news channel? That's not included here. Josh, do you know? You know?
I do know, because nothing was actually said by anyone from British Horse Racing, or be that from the BHA, who were not offered an opportunity to put a rounded side. And I have no problem with news organisations or media organisations. They can put what they want, as long as they put a rounded view to it, and not an extremist one-sided view to it. And that is where it's become a negative. I had texts from members of my family who had nothing to do with horse racing going, is there any way you could test them before they run to make sure they're okay? They've never texted me ever about horse racing, ever. And they know I've worked in it since I was 4 years old. So it shows the reach when you've got mainstream negativity out there. And this is the problem. If you do the rounded view, I know that the ITV Racing team as a whole are really not happy with why they weren't approached in any way, shape or form to give a view. And it needs to be a rounded view. You can still, if you want to put Animal Rising on the television, they can put, as long as you've got someone that can then go and put across another point of view. Otherwise, you've got a one-sided debate, and that is not a debate. A debate is where there's 2 sides to it. So it was a very strange decision for me in the way that they did it. It's up to them whether they put it on there or not. I don't think we've got any right to say what they can and can't do as a news organisation, but we should definitely have had the opportunity to put our case forward. And that is also the big problem in our sport. Who is the spokesperson for our sport? We saw some fantastic people from both the media and the racecourses. So I'm talking about Nevin Truesdale, I'm talking about Kevin Blake, Richard Hoyles.
All 3 were excellent.
They were really, really good in various different and some difficult circumstances and questioning by some of the hardest presenters in terms of Paxman-esque in Kay Burley and all sorts of people like that, asking difficult questions.
Here's Morgan.
And they eloquently and brilliantly across a lot of media platforms. But that was their choice. And we need, as a sport, we need a spokesperson and an organisation which, on the one hand, in terms of the BHA, is the leader of our sport. Well, who is leading it? Who is there in front of the media to be counted? That's what leading means. Leading doesn't mean that you're back in the back office moving things around paper or bringing out new rules. It means that you're public, front and centre, and you're leading our sport and defending our sport. And I know that they weren't asked. They've since said they're going to write to ITV, which I think why should you have to write to them? You should have been asked in the first place. If ITV, everyone tells us we have a fantastic relationship with ITV, blah 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 blah. They're crucial to the to the existence of the sport and the promotion of the sport. And then on the other hand, this goes and happens. It does seem very disjointed on that front. But going back to the BHA, and obviously last week we had the announcement of Lord Allen, who I have to say...
Well, just before we get to that, and I'm interested to talk to you about that as well. This is not the first time that ITV have done this. The whole rhetoric surrounding the Grand National and is it ethical to have horses jumping around the Aintree fences, that came from this morning. And if you remember, there was nobody from ITV Racing there to offer a rebuttal or to stand up for racing. Nevin Truesdale, CEO of the Jockey Club, who's been an eloquent spokesperson in defending racing the whole way through, he wasn't there. And one would think the reason they didn't have Ollie Bell, Matt Chapman, Alice Plunkett, Francesca Kamani, a Richard Hoyles, a Rishi Prasad, is because they didn't want somebody who's eloquent and engaging and likable and who can speak in logic and cold hard facts and put the point across to defend the sport in a really sensible way. Instead, they wanted somebody who wasn't very likable and doesn't really know, isn't intrinsically linked to the racing industry, to go and fight on the racing industry's behalf against Orla Coughlin, who had her talking points and was allowed to get away with disingenuous talking points the whole way through and conflating arguments and virtue signal with no real rebuttal. And that led to the whole thing kicking off. So you would think, okay, that's the This Morning team. Surely that will never happen again. The ITV executives will ensure that there has to be a fair and balanced editorial policy. This is ITV News. This isn't some social media channel. This is ITV News. And to the best of your knowledge and the best of my knowledge, the BHA were not asked to put forward a spokesperson. The Jockey Club, the owner of Cheltenham Racecourse, were not asked to put forward a spokesperson. And if they were given too late notice. But I don't think they were even contacted. And there is nobody from the ITV Racing team there to offer a rebuttal or to counter-argument instead. And so instead, you end up again with virtue signalling and disingenuous talking points. Where is the fact-based evidence for what she's saying? That if to protect these, I'm paraphrasing it, but to protect these horses, we should be banning the Grand National. What would happen to the horses then? If there's no thoroughbred racing industry, and their whole goal is to ban the breeding of thoroughbred racehorses, horses that have been carefully cultivated over hundreds of years to get the elite thoroughbred breed that we have now. She wants to ban that. This is an open statement from them. Ban the breeding of racehorses, which leads to what, Josh? The extinction of the thoroughbred breed. So they hate horse racing. They want to ban it. They want to campaign openly for the extinction of the thoroughbred breed. Why? How is that benefiting the thoroughbred breed? Killing them? That's what's going to be the better alternative to no racing industry.
There is no logic. There's no logic at all.
Well, why is that point not being made on ITV News?
Because this person isn't to make it. It's scaremongering. It's exactly what they're doing.
Why would you do that? That's an intentional, deliberate thing. Why would you do that against... You are the primary broadcaster of horse racing. So ITV wants all the benefits of broadcasting horse racing and all the great economic benefits that come from that. And be very, very clear about this. I'm pretty certain ITV Racing would like a narrative out there that British racing desperately needs ITV and that racing has to hitch its wagon to ITV, but that ITV doesn't need racing. When the truth is, nobody watches television live anymore. Linear television is dead. Channel 4 have announced that by 2030, they will no longer be a terrestrial broadcaster. They will be a streaming digital platform only. So if you switch on your television and watch Channel 4 live now, that's gone in 2030. And there's mass layoffs across every major television network around the UK and Europe. The television industry is in massive decline. There are two things that people will tune in to watch linear television for. One is news, and the other is sport. And news, while establishment media, the trust in that is at an all-time low. And that's not just restricted to the United States of America. That is very much a case in the United Kingdom as well. Go on X and you will see it very, very clearly. So the only thing that television companies can actively rely on is sport. And horse racing is massively popular. More people tuned in to watch the Grand National, significantly more, this year than ITV's coverage of the FA Cup final. I believe the broadcast figures are something along the lines of less than 3 million people watching ITV's coverage of the FA Cup final, but 6.1 million people watching the Grand National. So they need racing. They need it quite badly. Racing needs to have a very long think about its relationship with ITV, because while the relationship with ITV Racing might be very healthy, the relationship with the network itself, well, clearly our sport is under attack from them, and the sport needs to fight back about that.
It does. I can't say enough positives about the people behind ITV Racing, but the negatives around ITV News, because of what they put forward last night. I can only agree with what you just said, and there's no point repeating what you just said. But it needs to be, someone needs to stand up. And again, whose job is it to stand up? It can't be 6 different people who are eloquent and brilliant orators coming back with 6 different reasons why Animal Rising are wrong, or that putting racing's case forward. Because each of those cases that they're putting forward will be different, because it's their own personal cases. And what we need a combined communication strategy, a combined communications person that is front and center. And yes, everybody else can go and talk, but you hold a weekly briefing and say, okay, look, this is, if anyone's going out this week, this is where we're at. These are the latest stats, So the problem I find that we've got is people like Animal Rising come on and they go, horse racing's cruel. They kill horses. That's all they want to do, is get across that it's cruel and they kill people and they want it banned. Those are those 3 things. And what we do is we have half a dozen brilliantly eloquent people and knowledgeable, logical people that come on and return serve on those 3 suggestions. They will return them with 6 different answers. And the Animal Rising keeps going, it's cruel, it kills, banned. Yeah. Cruel. Look, what was it? Face, trace, fucking whatever it was with Boris and COVID. You need those 3 things. Hands, face, space. Hands, face, space. And what do? You remember hands, face, space. They're going cruel, dead, ban. Cruel, dead, ban.
They have a consistent, sustained message the whole way through, whereas we're just a mess. But I would say if you gave Matt Chapman 30 seconds last night on ITV News, he'd have ended that very quickly.
Yeah, he would. Yeah.
He'd have rebutted that very, very quickly, and he would have put up a staunch defense of racing. He would have been emotive, but he would have put up a staunch defense of the sport. But that opportunity isn't given there. And
it doesn't matter. Even if it was, they won't. Let's say they go on Sky News and Richard Hoyles goes on, and they go cruel, dead, ban. And Richard Hoyles will answer it in a very different way to how Matt Chapman would answer it. Equally eloquent, but in a very different way. And what you need to do is we want whatever those 3 things are, we need to, because that's what we need people to remember, because you only remember those 3 things. We're coming back with over a dozen things from 6 different individuals on different programs, and they come with 3. That's all they remember. They remember this rhythm. and that's what they do.
Well, I would put forward the argument. I'd put forward the argument that the best response or the best defense of that is, what's more cruel? Thoroughbred racehorses who are bred to racing, or throwing them in a field, abandoning them, and letting the entire breed go extinct, which is what Animal Rising want.
Yeah, I'm not, and that's what I'm not. I'm not saying to you what the response should be. No, I'm saying it needs to be a.
There should be a consistent message. You're right, and we
all agree. What you've just said is what we all go with. Boom. That's what we. And then you'll hear that 6 times, and people go, "Oh," because it's like it's called jab in a marketing sense. It's called jab, 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 right hook. You need to hear things 3 times before you go for the sale. And that's what it is. You've seen an advert here, an advert there, a thing on the telly, a bit on social media. Now it's that continued thing. And this is the same. And they've got it down to a T. We haven't. We look completely disorganized. We haven't got a leader. We haven't got a spokesperson. So we're very easy pickings. We've just got individuals who are not coordinated. Okay,
we need a spokesperson. I'm amazed the BHA haven't done this already, or the Jockey Club haven't done this already. That's a great idea. I think the Sam Hoskins organization, Stand Up for Racing, you could work with them, identify somebody, approach them, pick them, coordinate what the talking points are going to be, and then that's the person you put forward to go and defend racing. That is something that should be done. It must be done very, very quickly.
Yeah.
The BHA also have to have a serious word with ITV. And there needs to be a big decision made about what the future is for British racing broadcasting. If that attack came from the BBC, I wouldn't have batted an eyelid. Just, well, yeah, typical BBC, of course they're having a pop at us. It came from the primary broadcaster of horse racing. That's not acceptable. And we can't just take that line down. And there's another point to be made as well, Josh. And all of this stuff is very emotive. The whip is very emotive. This is why the rhetoric surrounding the Pro Cush is so bad. What are you doing? All you have to do is say the Pro Cush is not a welfare issue. It was developed with input from the RSPCA. It is made of fiberglass, rubber, and foam padding. There is no peer-reviewed study anywhere on the planet that says it causes pain to racehorses when used correctly. Jockeys have to use it as a correctional tool and to assist in a racehorse winning a race, and we restrict the amount of times they can use it, even though it's not a welfare issue. That's all you have to say. Explain it to people. Explain why the Pro Cush is a thing. Don't enact a bunch of rules that are so backward and difficult to follow that 40% of the jockeys riding in the United Kingdom end up breaching the whip rules, resulting in an endless stream of negative headlines for jockeys picking up bans. That's on you, BHA. That's your fault. It's not the jockey's fault. It's your fault for doing that. Own your mistake. We all make mistakes. We've all been wrong about things. It's horrible when you're wrong. Elton John said it best. Sorry seems to be the hardest word. You have engaged in the most disingenuous practices, and you'll try and lie about this as well. Everybody sees through it. Stop with the disingenuous talking points. Admit you were wrong. Work with the jockeys. They want to work with you. They need to work with you, and you need to work with them. Because without our jockeys, we don't have a sport. And unless you're at the very top echelon of this sport and you're a jockey, you don't make a whole lot of money. So when you are restricting a person from earning a living for adhering to the number one guideline of racing, you must obtain the best possible finishing position because they used a non-welfare issue excessively in a race. That's just crazy. And you're giving more fodder to people like this lunatic from Animal Rising. And of course ITV then run with that. That's your fault. Sort that out. The other thing is, the farmers are going to protest this week, and best of luck to them. I hope it goes well for them. I guarantee you there's going to be an enormous amount of those people, the farmers, out protesting. And best of luck to them. I hope it goes well for them. I hope they get what they want. They will have huge numbers marching on the streets of London, protesting what the Labour government is doing. There was a march in Britain last year protesting horse racing. 5 people were arrested. Are you joking me? We're in a tizzy over the opinions of 5 people. Let's go a little bit further, shall we? The protest at the Grand National. 118 people were arrested that day by Merseyside police. Now, that's not good. And I would imagine that the Jockey Club and the BHA and Great British Racing and every other group in racing was in a panic about that. Oh my goodness, 118 people have been arrested by the Merseyside police. What are we going to do? Well, maybe you could consider the fact that there were 58,227 paying people at Aintree Racecourse that day. Maybe you could consider the fact that there was over 128,000 people in attendance at Aintree for the 3 days of the 2023 Grand National meeting. How about the fact that 7.5 million people tuned in to watch ITV's coverage of the Grand National? How about the fact that there were 500 million people watching the Grand National in 140 countries around the world, making it one of the most watched horse races in the entire world in 2023. And bear in mind, national hunt racing is only really a thing in Great Britain, the Republic of Ireland, and France. But 140 countries tuned in to watch the Grand National at Aintree, because that's what a special race that is. That's the interest it gathers. £150 million sterling was the turnover for the race in 2023. According to some of the figures, it was the highest 1 minute audience for a sporting event on ITV in 2003. Again, British racing is very valuable to ITV. Very valuable to it. If you're going to say to me that if we don't self-regulate and we don't do these things about the whip, that some politician or the government are going to come in and they're going to ban racing, you show me any politician who would side with 118 purple-haired pronouns in bios extremists over 128,000 paying customers and a global television audience of 507 million people, and I'll show you a loser. This sport needs to really go and fight for itself, Josh. It needs to stand up and fight for itself and stop just kowtowing to a vocal minority.
It does. But the last thing you just said is the key difference. They are vocal. The 58,000 don't say anything.
Yeah.
The 150,000 don't say anything. The 6 million people don't say anything. The 150 million turnover doesn't say anything. The 118 make a lot of noise. And if you're the only one that's speaking, they're the only ones that are going to get listened to.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think when Jeremy Clarkson and the farmers protest through the streets of London, do you think Keir Starmer is going to cave and instantly give them whatever they want? Because I don't think he will. And there will be a lot of people there. There will be thousands of people streaming through the streets of London to protest on their behalf. 5 people were arrested in London protesting horse racing. Why? Why are you freaking out about so little people? If they want to protest horse racing, it is their democratic right to do that. We don't live in a fascist dictatorship. We live in a democracy. And I strongly disagree with you if you want to protest racing. I strongly disagree with you if you want to protest the use of the Pro-Cush. I strongly disagree with you if you want the Pro-Cush banned, because I can see where that goes. You ban the Pro-Cush, which is not a welfare issue. How can you possibly justify the Grand National, which horses have died in? How can you possibly justify national hunt racing? How can you justify Cheltenham when 2 horses die of a heart attack? Because there's common sense. This is racing we're talking about here. They are horses. They are race horses. They are bred to race. Most people will sleep soundly following horse racing. It might be a cold, hard fact to see a horse die, and nobody wants to see it happen. But the alternative is those racehorses are abandoned in a field and allowed to die off and go extinct. I'm not comfortable with that at all. That would be the greatest equine catastrophe since World War II. So the sport needs to stand up for itself. And instead of being so worried about optics and perception, look at the optics of what you have. The 2nd most attended outdoor sport in the UK. The 5th most watched sport on British television. There's an article in the Racing Post today, which for the most part is a brilliant publication. And Tom Kerr, a fabulous editor of it, he saved that publication. He has restored it back to being the best horse racing website. And there are some great ones, but the Racing Post is the best, without question. How do we attract young people to racing? And racing's got to do something to attract young people. If you ever go on to the Race Day TV social media channels, you'll see Ella McNeil and Frankie Foster, and they are surrounded by hundreds, if not thousands, of young people going racing. Every single day, they are uploading content with young people who have chosen to go racing. The sport is doing all right in that regard. There is a lot more good in racing than negativity. The pro-cush nonsense, you need to stop that. You are giving fodder to the people who want to destroy the sport, and they will never be appeased. And the changes to the Grand National, okay, we can argue about whether or not they've been effective, but if every single time a racehorse suffers a catastrophic injury and you change the Grand National, eventually you're going to run out of changes to make.
I agree, but I also agree that the changes that they made to the Grand National I thought were good. They were well thought out. I thought the jockeys came to the party big time in terms of the speed of which they did the first half of the race. So I think it was a great piece of when everyone comes together, it's amazing what this sport can achieve.
Well said.
And there are a few examples of where that happens. There needs to be a hell of a lot more. And because together we are so strong. And that's why I was talking earlier on about us singing with one voice. Those people we have some amazing people. Join them up together.
Yeah.
Jesus, you try and take us on now. But we're so fragmented because we have no one leading and coordinating the strategy, be that an industry strategy, be that a people strategy, or be that a communication strategy. And that's the BHA freely admit that they are a reactive organisation. And what we need is a proactive leadership of this sport that goes, here is the vision, here are the barriers that we're going to face along the way, and this is how we're going to work with them looking forward, rather than going, this is today's problem, and I'm going to solve today's problem.
Well, that's racing, this is why the CEO of the BHA needs to be a unifying figure that can bring the sport together and that people can rally behind, and hopefully that person, whoever they are, is able to identify, pick, and properly fund a spokesperson who can go out and really fight for the sport. So you're very well connected. What is the feeling in British racing as to who is going to be the CEO of the BHA?
Well, I think the biggest clue was made last week when Lord Allen was made chair. A non-racing person, but equally, when asked by Nick Luck, Wilf Walsh, who was part of the nominations committee, turned around and said Lord Allen ticked every box. Well, there must have been not a box there that said, outside of the fact it was in the job description, that you needed a thorough understanding, knowledge and passion of horse racing. That's not the case. Lord Allen learned how to ride a horse in his teenage years, and he likes horse racing. I think it was as loose as anything in terms of the announcement. Lord Allen is a fantastic chair. I know of his work very well because I work very closely with the Invictus Games Foundation, of which he is chair. So he's sensible, he's commercial, he's media savvy, and he is a safe pair of hands. But what that has made happen is the chief exec has got to be with racing experience. You can't have the blind leading the blind. And no matter what your board makeup is, you're going to have someone from within inside the sport now. I think that's you're not going to get someone coming across from cricket, football, another sport, which would have been fine if you'd have put a chair in with a racing background. Equally, this person could well be the spokesperson of the sport as well. You've talked about hiring one. Well, they might well be the one. Well, they're definitely going to have to be a good orator, because no matter if you do align our great defensive mechanisms or our proactive people about promoting our sport, you're still going to have to with that title, that you will be put on the front line at times to defend our sport. If you look internally, I was a big backer of Richard Wang was publicly quoted saying, I think Richard Wayman would be a fantastic, if you are looking internally to promote within. I've since heard that whether he wants it or not is another thing, but equally he's eminently sensible. He talks with logic. He's not emotional. I've heard that Brandon Shea is, who's also obviously the head of regulatory at the BHA, is in the running for it. But then if you look outside of the BHA, when you've got like the likes of Paul Johnson or Paul Struthers, that are all ex-BHA that now run the associations, I can't really see myself chief exec wise, Nevin Truesdale tells me he's not going for it, but could well have been I think, and still could be. I think we should probably lobby Nevin to do it, because I think he'd be a great person to actually run the sport, and perhaps could be suited better by that than actually his previous role of the Jockey Club.
I could be wrong about this, but I don't think that Nevin was ever really given the opportunity to properly do what he wanted at the Jockey Club. I think he had one too many radical notions and was just prevented from being able to put those things through, or perhaps they were uncomfortable. I think he was a very good leader who was never really given the opportunity to do what he wanted.
Well, he had to battle, as everyone has. He came in on the back of the Delia Bushell debacle, so it's not exactly like you're landing on a hard, firm surface to get rocking and rolling on. You're slightly in defensive mode to rebuild brand when there have been some really negative headlines going out from both sides of that unfortunate situation, shall we call it. And then COVID hits. So it's like, welcome to your 3 or 4 years as the Jockey Club. And I have to say, I think he's done a very good job in terms of, he can't do a brilliant job at everything, because it just doesn't happen. But I think what he has chosen in terms of his focus, standing up for our sport on a welfare front, being the person that put forward the affordability checks to be debated in government, the petition. The petition. And he was the man that put the petition forward. He's a brilliant person in terms of his staff. Yeah. I mean, and he stands footlong straight. They will go to war for Nevin Truesdale. And it is unfortunate that he's now looking at another role, wherever that be, in or out of the sport. I think it is out of the sport. But I think he looked back proudly at the situation that he's managed to guide the Jockey Club through, who weren't in the best financial state either. And as a financier, he's helped them out with that as well, because of course he was the financial director for 10 years as well. So I think he can be solidly proud and leave knowing that he's done the best job he possibly could, and he's helped us as a sport, especially on that welfare front. We needed someone who probably wasn't, if you put me, you, Chappers, Hoyles, Lydia, whoever from the media, we have media experience or are media trained, and people will go, oh, there he is, he's media trained. Nevin wasn't. Nevin came in as the chief exec. And that's what I'm saying. When we get the chief exec of the BHA, they need to be a good orator, because they are going to be asked the question. They cannot, like has happened over the last 5 years, hide behind the corridors of power. Well said. You need a CEO who's going to be front-facing, and Nevin would do that. I think of all the people you mentioned, he's the one who makes the most sense for the role. What exactly the power is of the BHA anymore, considering the power that the racecourses have and the various different ownership groups, that's a conversation for another day. But it's going to be fascinating to see who gets that role, and it needs to be somebody strong. And look, you and I talked about this before when you were on the show back in January. British racing really does need to have a long, hard look at what it's doing in terms of its digital and social media strategy. And I'm not just talking about doing a funny clip with the champion jockey. I'm talking about actually uploading the clips and showing racing live on YouTube. This is something the Breeders' Cup did highly successfully. The New York Racing Association broadcast all of their meetings live on YouTube. That's something that British racing should be actively looking towards. Now, I don't know what the media rights situation is between Sky and Racing TV, but YouTube is the number one streaming site in the world isn't Netflix, it's YouTube. And you should be taking advantage of that. And there's so many different people in racing media. Ali Vance is doing lots of stuff on track. She's a brilliant presenter. You could easily be using someone like her. Quite frankly, I would love the opportunity to go and do something like that myself. I've never had anybody from Racing TV say, hey, would you like to come and do this? They probably don't think I'm good enough, and that's fair enough. But if I was given that opportunity, I would grasp that with both hands. And there are so many young broadcasters and various different broadcasters who are doing podcasts who are all excellent, who would be well able to do various different things like that for British racing and to promote it in the right way. This is something that Irish racing needs to be properly looking at as well. YouTube is there. Linear television is dead. Embrace YouTube if you can do content on the if it's possible to do that. That is absolutely something the British Horse Racing Authority should be actively working towards. And it pans generations. That's the thing. And that was what I think my biggest disappointment outside of knowing the fact that the industry strategy was going to fall flat on its arse because no one was going to take it up, was even on day one when I was in a fan engagement and broadcast innovation, and they talked about terrestrial TV, and they even talked about mooted. This was 2 years ago now. The Jockey Cup, which has just arrived, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a second. And I was saying, my kids don't watch ITV. They don't watch Sky. They watch YouTube, big time, Netflix, Apple, and every other single thing that I'm having to pay for each month on the family bundle subscription. So YouTube I think, is our number one key driver of a new fan base, and have young people on there talking in a way with content that is engaging to them, and not have people of my age and older dictating what goes on YouTube. You can't just sort of stream. Our default one goes, oh yeah, well, we'll just stream what we've got now. No. Completely change it up.
Yeah.
Get teenagers presenting it. We've got all these people. The Invades organisation that Dominic runs, brilliant, and it's growing and growing and growing. Start utilising that. They're employing content creators promoting coming horse racing. Why are we leaving it to someone else? So, and I think it's somewhere where if people go in their current rights holders, including people who I work for at Sky and the Racing Partnership and RMG, if they're going, it's not really on the radar, or we'll show a bit and you can get form of the Cheltenham Festival for the last 30 years on YouTube on there. If they don't care about it, well, that gives us an opportunity where they can actually come together, and you don't have to have two different channels. You can have a focus meeting each day. You can do some great chat shows on couches with young people and all this kind of stuff with both organisations. They've come together finally again with Great British Racing International, and are now selling our rights internationally. Well, please, here's an ask for RMG and the Racing Partnership. Come together. Do a combined YouTube channel that gets out there, that is focused on next gen, because you're not going to piss the purist off, because they're already watching.
You've nothing to lose with that. It makes perfect sense. You've nothing to lose and everything to gain. And if RMG and the Racing Partnership can work together to sell the rights internationally, then there's no problem with working together to produce a co-production on YouTube. And
it's big TV. This is not expensive television. It's already being shown. You're just streaming it in and talking about it. We're putting content in around it at the same time.
Josh,
it was only just before COVID that I have to say the likes of RMG and others were banning people using mobile phones. You remember video?
Oh, I remember, yeah.
On course. Of course, now you see it all the time. One of the only good things that came out of COVID was, we now get great clips of jockeys giving feedback after the race and people doing this. But it seems we are so slow in embracing technology and how it moves forward and how we can engage people. We're walking around with an engagement tool. Everyone is. Let's get it out there, but bring it underneath this banner of our YouTube. And then I think it would be fantastic, because it sometimes gets lost when you look at the opening show and ITV, when they look to try and they've got a broad church, or they say they've got a broad church. I don't think they've got the young church, but they try and do stuff around like the social stable, when actually their audience is the older audience. You only have to look at the adverts on ITV to see that is an older audience.
Exactly.
Watching that. So here, maybe ITV have an ITV YouTube channel racing, whatever it works out to be, I don't mind. But then go down using the platform that they're on and actually saying this is designed for under 30s. Look what's happened. End of Josh rant, but look what's happened in Australia. When you focus and use the right people and the right content, it can work and promote to our sport. There were some amazing stats that came out of the Melbourne Cup Carnival about the under 30s attending that carnival, and the numbers are going through the roof. It dropped after COVID. They went down to 70,000. I think they're up in the 90,000s now, and the majority of that uplift is from the under 30s. That's from a coordinated effort, exactly the same as when they went after the 100 in cricket, and the purists went, "Oh God, no! It's another damning nail in the coffin of cricket." They said, "No, this is aimed at families. You turn up to a 100 event full of families."
And do you think any of those 90,000 people who are turning up to the Melbourne Cup are offended by the whip? Oh my goodness, it's a broken. Stop. Yeah. Do yourselves a favor. See the common sense. But it's a huge opportunity. There's a massive opportunity there. Even on X. You can stream on X as well. If there's one thing, and I know that TDS is very, very real, but there is one thing that Trump's victory tells us. Establishment media is dead. The corporate media told you he'd be a dictator on day one. He's a fascist. He's the end of democracy. Literally, you'll never be able to vote in an election again if you vote for this man. Ah! He wins the popular vote. 30% of black men under the age of 45 voted for Donald Trump. He won the Muslim vote, the Arab vote, the Catholic vote, the 18 to 29-year-olds. 43% of them rejected everything the corporate establishment media, the Hollywood elites, all of the elite left-wing politicians and some of the right-wing politicians and the biggest music stars in the world all telling he's a threat to democracy. He'll be a dictator on day one. No, he won't be. I don't care what your politics are. I really don't care. That's a personal thing. You decide for yourself who you want to vote for. It's all corrupt. It's all massively corrupt. Doesn't matter who you vote for. It's majorly corrupt. But basically, mate, you think you live in a democracy, it's corporate rule. That's what it is. There are no countries, there are corporations. This is corporate rule. But he won the popular vote, and the Republicans swept everything. If that doesn't tell you that establishment media is dead, that virtue signaling talking points are dead, then I don't really know what to say to you. But that's the way it is. Can I steal you for a little bit longer and ask you about the Jockeys Cup, because I do want to actually talk about something that's positive as opposed to just like incredibly down. The Jockeys Cup is something to genuinely be excited about. There's a quote from Harry Cobden today saying he's much more interested in going after this than being champion jockey, which might to some seem like an extraordinary thing for the champion jockey to say, but there's 500 grand up for grabs and there's no monetary value to being champion jockey aside from it's makes you more marketable. This is a really, really good initiative, Josh, particularly seeing as it goes down prize money to the top 10.
Is this racing's live moment when it's starting to realise the smaller could be beautiful? It doesn't mean we had to get a smaller fixture list, even though I would be a fan of that. But what are we trying to sell? And as Frankham always said to me, I think I said last time I was on this show, what's the fun in biscuits if there's always biscuits in the tin? And packaging it up that I can understand it more and it's attractive to new and incumbent fans and it's glitzy and it's showbiz, I think this is a really good start. Jockeys are the ones that can speak. I know this sport is about the horse. I love them to death. That's why I've got them on the wall. But equally, they can't speak, and jockeys can. And I think that Full Gallop, for its pluses and minuses, I think was really good for what it was trying to achieve as a first instance. Anyone could knock anything, but I think it was overall, it was good. What it brought about is we've got some fantastic characters that could well attract new fans. And of course, if they're running around now for £500,000, all the better. And Harry Cobden this morning has turned around and said, he'd rather have £500,000 in his back pocket than for no financial reward Jockeys Championships. And it's interesting how things again, but this is innovation and moving forward. I could understand that it started whenever it was on Saturday, and it'll run through to the Friday, the night before the Grand National. There is a structure, it's small, and away you go. You look at motorsport, F1 is at the top of motorsport. That's where generally people see motorsport for the first time. It's small, I'm not into F1, but I believe it's around the 16 to 18 race series. But then you get into it and you can disseminate off to other touring cars or whatever, different parts of a very large industry like horse racing is. But you need something small to start off with. You can't go, here's 1,500 meetings, and I'm not going to tell you what's the difference between one and the other. But they wear silly hats at one and top hat and tails, and they wear tweed at another one, and there's nothing that can really tell the outsider the difference. Here, it's smaller. These are our big races that you need to look at, and they will be big showcase races. I believe it's not dissimilar to Project Pace that they're looking at, which is obviously flat racing related in terms of our top 40 meetings. And of course, that's all designed in terms of Whirlpool. But again, it's going to be the small part that we're selling at the top. So really like this element to it. I, for my sins, was the chief executive of the Jockeys Association way back when Seb Sanders and Jamie Spencer came through the door at the November meeting at Doncaster, and both of them said, and they drew and said, never again. You can't have your champions just going, sod this, and just completely drained. We've just seen Harry Cobden wins his first jockey championship. This comes along, he says, I'd rather win this. We've just seen Ashim Murphy regain his title and go, tell you what, next year I'm going to focus on quality rather than quantity.
Well, he keeps saying that, and then he keeps going for the championship. Agreed.
But you look at Ryan Moore or Frankie Dettori, they go and win jockey championships for a couple of years, and then they go, we're now global sportsmen, and that's where they want to go and focus their time. So bringing it smaller together and what's celebrated, you look at Australia, it's obviously the metropolitan tracks that they go for their championships there. I can see where the tide is going in terms of making more of our jockeys. I think it's brilliant. Giving them some cash. And some people going, well, it's £500,000 compared to what they usually earn. It's still not enough. They're the stars of our sport. There are horses that are one horse over jumping, or even more than that. You look at them, what they're going for. It's the price of one horse that's going into trading from a dispersal sales that we've seen in the last 6 months. So I think the money's great. It stand out. I think the jockeys will love it. I think they really get behind it. I've noticed Harry Skelton having his winners at the weekend, high-fiving the people, the crowd at the end of the pull-up at Cheltenham, interacting with the crowd more, speaking to them on the way to post. This is completely different to only 10 years ago. More use of jockey cam. So yes, it's great. There was some very strong work. That's the one side. So I'm a massive backer of it. I think it's really good. Is it a negative against the championship? Yes, but what is the championship? This is going to be more to the core and people can understand it. Our own flat championships runs from the Guineas to Champions Day. It doesn't start at Doncaster. And it doesn't end, or it doesn't do all the way. Once it was doing it on a 12-month period. So they do change, they do innovate. They're able to do it. I don't know if they even need. There's no rule changes that needs to happen for that to happen. Do you know what I mean? It's an agreement of what the PGA and the media backers put forward. So I'm a big fan of it. Well done to Flutter and obviously. In memory of David Power, stalwart of Paddy Power for many a year, for putting substantial amount of money to it. It goes down to 10th as well, so it's not just looking after the right at the top end who have got decent amount of cash, but who, if you name the top sports person in their sport, this will be an interesting one. Name another sport, and I can probably name you 10 sports above us where the top person gains £250,000 in income in a year, which is what Harry Cobden has published today, earned last year. You're now looking at hockey, netball, not our top cricketer, our top rugby player, our top football player, our top athletes, our top rugby player,
top darts players
all earn more than our top jockey.
That's insane.
So it's so I think it's brilliant, and how many of the rest of them get followed around by an ambulance when they're doing their job?
Yeah, it's they don't get paid enough, and
no, not at all.
You mentioned Champions Full Gallop, like the obsession with prize money in that, and not pointing out the fact that Gavin Sheehan's won £1 million in prize money, but it actually it's 6.8% for a win and 3.5% for a place. Like it's ludicrous what jockeys are paid, and. Any opportunity to give them more money, any opportunity to boost their profile is something that we should absolutely be behind. So plaudits to everybody involved in this. This is good. This is very, very
Absolutely.
good.
I think that there was one negative that was put out, which was a communications or poor little old me, which was the ROA. I'm a huge fan of Louise Norman. I think she's really good. Wasn't the ROA, but there was some strong language used in the statement, and I've not seen that language before. Now, in case I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure that the Jockey Cup would have been discussed with the BHA and the BHA board.
Be surprised if it wasn't.
Okay, so yeah, let's take it as it was. Okay, on the BHA board is Charlie Parker, who is not only a neighbour of the Apiafis in Lambourne, but he is the chair of, or was the chair of the Thoroughbred Group. I think he's the chair of the ROA now, but he's the chair. And they're saying the ROA didn't know about the Jockey Cup before then. So I want to know how, can you and I just invent something and then we launch it into British horse racing tomorrow without it going through the BHA? So there must be somewhere there has been a lack of communication. Now, Louise has said in her statement that she was informed in a press release 2 days before the Jockey Cup was announced and said that owners were not consulted. Now, I'm always a believer you should do things behind closed doors far more than this. I'd like to know what happened before then about the Jockey Cup. The Jockey Cup was mooted, I have to say, a long time ago when they started doing the industry strategy and the broadcast strategy. There was already talk of this going on. So it's been planned for a long, long time. But equally, if there is a big sponsorship deal for stalls handlers, does the ROA need to know? Do you know what I mean? It's just one element of the sport. Or we go and do a massive deal for stable staff that we're going to sponsor and they're all going to wear this and blah, blah, blah. You know, hang on a minute. Well, let's look after our own, not look after our own, but we've got bigger problems. Who's in charge of gaining, as I talked about at the beginning of the year, who is in charge of getting more owners into this sport? No one. But if it's the ROA, which is the race one, you would think it would probably be them. But it isn't. So let's look at how we strengthen an ROA and our offering to owners and not worry that one side of the sport has managed to come up with an innovation which could help promote the sport.
Isn't this what Barry Hearn was talking about? He wouldn't touch racing despite the fact that he revolutionized boxing, snooker, darts, because there's too many self-interested parties and you'd never get them all together to agree on things. And yeah, exactly. Maybe the policy on this was sometimes it's best to ask forgiveness than permission. And they just decided, if we announce this, nobody can oppose it.
It's a bit like retrospective planning. just build it and then apply for planning afterwards.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was the only one. I think I was just surprised by the wording. And I think there's probably a good bit of communication that people learn. And I hope it goes on. And I think it could be one. We rarely get new innovation in our sport.
Yeah.
And I really like this. And as do those that could receive it, but as do the media. We can talk about it. Yeah, it's a great talking point on the way through. And Harry's backing it up. And he's only on 8 points. And Sean and Harry Skelton are on 40 odd points or whatever it is. So
well, I'll be honest, my initial reaction to this was, hang on a second, like this is only going to be able to be won by one of the elite jockeys. Why are you not pumping money into the lower end of it or doing something for the smaller jockeys? And then I thought about it and I went, wow, that's hilariously wrong, because only one of the best jockeys is going to be champion jockey. It's going to be Brian Hughes or Sean Bowen or Dan Skelton. Sorry, Dan Skelton. Harry Skelton or Harry Cobden, or if Paul Townend or Jack Kennedy were to come over to the UK, one of them would probably be able to challenge for it. But realistically, it's going to be one of those core group of 4 British-based jockeys. They're some of the highest earners in the sport, and they deserve every single cent they get, by the way, because they're some of the best at it. So, no, this is great, because that's long been a complaint I've had. There's no real monetary value to being champion jockey aside from you get to have the title.
And it goes down to 10th. So it's not like it's just the top three
Yeah.
who have got enough money to pay their mortgage.
Yeah.
It goes down to ones which will be life-changing amounts of cash. And if Harry Cobden wins it, I'm sure there'll be some new breed of bull or heifer that he's going to buy for his amazing farm.
Any opportunity to talk about racing and put the focus of the sport on the jockey as opposed to, let's send Luke Harvey into the crowd and talk to a bunch of drunk people and, oh, everyone's having so much fun. Look at the children. They're all having so much. Focus on the racing, please. And this is an opportunity to get back to more of that. So no, this is great. This is great. This is very positive.
And I think they'll tweak it as you should along the way. When they launched the FedEx Cup in golf, it was, this, that, and it will tweak. I hope it stays and it survives the tweaking. My only, as I look at it now, I want it to finish with a fanfare.
Yes.
And it's finishing the night before the Grand National where everyone's going to be talking about that. And then you go, okay, so what's after that? So after the Grand National, you have the Scottish National. So it could get the Coral Scottish National. So you could do it around there and it'd be more of a fanfare because the following week, and you could then say, why doesn't it finish at Sandown? And that's when it will cannibalise a championship.
Yeah.
So that's where the championships are. So I can understand, and I think there'll be some massaging of it as I hope it's a, and I haven't seen it announced as a more than a 1 year deal. I sincerely hope it is because it's something I think the media, all as in the media, and all backers of the sport should back.
This is worth more to racing than Champions Full Gallop, which never cracked the top 50 of the most watched shows in the UK, despite the fact that it was on 9 p.m. on Friday nights on ITV. And Gogglebox is one of the most watched shows on Channel 4 on the BBC. Get it. Coronation Street was airing at 9:02 during the European Championships and the Olympics, and that they all cracked the top 50. This is worth more. This is worth a lot more.
Gallop has been signed off for Series 2 and that the Levy Board are coming to the party on funding on it as well.
Good.
So
good.
That hasn't been announced, but that's what my belief is and my understanding of where it goes. And
it would be also a very good idea to get Nathan Horrocks and the Horsepower production team involved in it because you need to focus on the actual nitty-gritty of the racing, take us behind the scenes, show us the raw emotion of the sport. Follow a guy like Ross Millar going over to Eastern Europe and sourcing Roger, and then the incredible occasion of that horse winning first time out and the lows of that horse getting beaten and then the brutal low of losing that horse. Yeah. That's part of racing. I'm sorry, it is. And if you can't accept that that's part of racing, this sport is not for you. That's okay. That's okay.
Do you know what? Do you know in Series 2 of Drive to Survive? Now, I'm not a F1 fan, but I'll watch Drive to Survive. I think it's a great entertainment program. Obviously, in Series 1, no Lewis Hamilton, none of the big boys in it, and it needed time to build. Series 2 or 3, the most watched episode was called Man on Fire. And it was when that crash and he gets out and it's the most unbelievable image where you're like, and his wife is watching and it's just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with the racing. Is it a positive? It shows how dangerous their sport is.
Yeah.
But it was because that's what gets people to care about the sport, that there is the risk element within it. So it's all part of the marketing mix, let's put it that way. Yeah. So I sincerely hope it's less presenter focused and far more racing focused in Series 2.
The only people you needed and the only people you need for Season 2 as part of the Talking Head segment are Rishi Prasad, Ali Vance, Alice Plunkett. That's it. That's it. Nobody else. 3 talking heads and spread them out. Have one of them for one episode, have another for another episode. We don't need people explaining things to us. Show us. Show, don't tell.
I watch lots of sports documentaries. I can't name you one other documentary that has talking heads in it of presenters of that sport.
Unbelievable. Not to that extent.
They were narrating in the background, but they're not a focus. So, but anyway, listen. It is. I'm already starting at a place of where this is overly positive, which is brilliantly positive, and I hope it can go on again.
Yeah.
And I think the Jockey Cup is another addition to it. So fair play. And obviously Flutter, who I have no affiliation to, were big backers of Series 1 of Full Gallop. They've been the big backers of the David Power Jockey Cup. At least they are trying to innovate. Go for it. I love innovation, and we just don't have enough of it.
Yeah. Grade F for Champions Full Gallop. Grade B plus for this. This is great. I just need to see how it works, but this is hugely positive. I think this is really, really good.
The Final Furlong podcast is proudly brought to you by Jeff Banks Bet. Get up to £500 refunded as real money for new Jeff Banks online accounts after your first month of betting. Use promo code FFP500 at jeffbanks.bet and buy BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Our listeners get 10% off your first month. So give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/FURLONG.